Against my better judgment, I'm going to talk about a Superman film, which is a subject that's been poisoned with really bad and dumb discourse for years now, but I review video games already anyway, which is no better at all in that regard, so why not talk about this too? I was pretty hyped for a new Superman movie. Not necessarily because of Gunn's involvement, though it did help, especially after seeing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which I really liked, but because I wanted another truly Superman-focused movie. We haven't had one since Man of Steel, and while I enjoy aspects of it, like Henry Cavill's aura, some performances, some of the production design, and the action, I felt it was still kinda lacking in the unabashed optimism and sense of hope that I've come to associate with Superman over the years, especially when compared to the 1978 film. But as the trailers for this year's Superman started to come out, I kinda felt that optimism again. I felt the vibrancy, the heart, and the hope. I felt some of the Silver Age wackiness and a lot of the Golden Age sincerity. So of course, I highly anticipated the film. In the months leading up to release, I decided to give myself a bit of a refresher on Superman. I rewatched the first Christopher Reeve film from 1978, Rest in Peace, rewatched 2006's Superman Returns, and rewatched 2013's Man of Steel. And to supplement those, I even watched bits and pieces of TV shows Smallville and Superman and Lois. Shout out to Tyler Hoechlin, a great TV Soups, and My Sephiroth. The most important media I consumed, however, was the comics. James Gunn and David Corenswet were pretty open about the main influences on the movie being All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely, as well as Superman for All Seasons by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. I took the chance to read those for the first time, and I added a few on top of them, namely Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and Alex Ross, and Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, written by Alan Moore. So, needless to say, I was prepared for the movie. Now, to put it bluntly, Superman feels like a comic book brought to life, which is mostly a good thing. David Corenswet feels like Superman. He gives off the vibe of a man who truly wants to do good for goodness' sake. It feels like the suit belongs on him. Some people might not enjoy the scenes where he loses his temper and yells, but I found them endearing. Superman is still a person who can get frustrated and angry, and usually justifiably so, but he never allows those feelings to make him throw away his morals. I actually really like the idea of Superman getting pissed off at the concept that he needs to ask a government's permission to save people, or that there's rules for helping the helpless. If someone is in danger and he can save them, then he will. Period. Another thing the movie goes out of its way to highlight is how much Superman cherishes life, putting the extra effort to disengage from a fight to save Metropolis citizens from harm, and even risk his own safety to try and defeat a giant rampaging kaiju without killing it. He wants to save people. He doesn't do it begrudgingly like it's a chore that's forced upon him. Now, some people might find that Boy Scout stuff lame, but I do not. I want that from my Superman. I want to see him actually save people and animals too, because he doesn't put a price on life and he cares about the individual as much as he cares about the whole group. That's the kind of Superman that gives me hope. Rachel Brosnahan is also strong as Lois Lane. She takes her hunt for the truth as one of Daily Planet's best reporters very seriously, to the point where she even criticizes Clark for how he interviews Superman at convenient moments. She's an honest and driven woman who thinks she's too different from Clark for their relationship to work, but it is that honesty and drive that makes her a great match for him. I really enjoyed their chemistry together. And then there's Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, Superman's greatest nemesis. Even among other strong performances, Holt is probably the heaviest hitter in the movie. He really embodies Luthor's egomania and obsessiveness. Lex is the type of villain who will say he hates soups because he holds humanity back or something, but we all know deep down he doesn't actually care about that, at least not as much as he says he does. He's mostly just pissy that Superman gets more attention than him. In fact, he more or less kinda admits that in the movie. He'll truly stop at nothing to destroy Superman, even if it means unquantifiable collateral damage. Any plan that Lex has that doesn't seem related to killing Superman secretly is related to it. He's brilliant, but also petty, petulant, and narcissistic. A bad combo. He is pathetic, but that makes him desperate and therefore dangerous. Maybe the best way to summarize Holt as Lex in this movie is that he is truly a despicable and hateable piece of shit. It's great. But what makes Lex stand out even more among the crazy comic book stuff happening around the movie is that his type of evil and malice manifests in plans that an actual rich and resourceful evil person could do in real life, like sell billions of dollars of weapons to a power-hungry regime trying to invade another country and wipe out its population. Next is the Justice Gang, with Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific, and Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl. These three have limited screen time, which is a shame in itself, but they make every second count. Whenever they speak, especially to each other, they ooze chemistry and charisma. Every line is meant to either make their personality shine through or progress the plot. There's no wasted moments with them. Gardner is an entertaining jerk, and Hawkgirl acts like an apathetic teenager despite technically being hundreds of years old thanks to her reincarnation powers. But Mr. Terrific in particular looks and acts as if he jumped right out of a damn comic book page. He is the only one in the movie who really gives Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor a run for his money in terms of presence and making the most out of his scenes, and he has less screen time. Gathegi is amazing in this role, and if anyone walked away from the movie saying he was their favorite, I would not argue in the slightest. Now there's also Krypto, the superdog, who, unfortunately for Superman, is very poorly trained, but ends up being a key player that helps the good guys. Now I will admit, sometimes Krypto's presence is a bit distracting, because every time he's in the scene, it absolutely has to shift to be about him, because he's a superpowered dog that doesn't know how to control himself, so if he's not on screen, then you have no idea what the hell he could be doing. Now, I do understand why that can be grating for some people, but for me, it wasn't that bad. There's also Ma and Pa Kent, who have a combined total of maybe 5 or so minutes of screen time themselves, but they really don't waste any of those seconds either. It's incredibly clear that they are a well-meaning couple who truly served as the foundation of Clark's moral compass. There's other cast members worth touching on, like reluctant Riz God Jimmy Olsen, but I'll sum up everything by saying that I don't think a single talent was wasted in this movie. I think everyone fulfilled their roles as best as they feasibly could. I don't think I would replace anyone if given the power. Gunn put everyone in their right place, and the end result is a cast list with no real weak links. And then there's the score. Now, while I don't think it's particularly mind-blowing, the score has some very emotional high points and a lot of great use of leitmotifs, taking passages from the main theme and reincorporating it in other tracks over the course of the movie. It feels nice to listen to and does a great job of evoking the original John Williams score from the 1978 film. Now, during the preview screenings and in some professional reviews, I saw some complaints of how fast the first 30 minutes of the film go by. Now, while I understand where they're coming from, I don't necessarily agree. It is true that the first act feels quite speedy because of how much information is being given, thanks to it essentially throwing us into the middle of the action. But I liked that. This is one of the parts where I felt the All-Star Superman influences, because that comic is basically a pretty fast-paced greatest hits story that touches briefly on all the crazy Silver Age adventures Superman went on, and the movie started in a somewhat comparable way and maintained it to an extent even after it slows down. I like that there's already a complex history already occurring with metahumans and overseas conflicts and such. It gives a sense of depth to the world. It shows that major events have always been happening, whether we saw them or not. Now that being said, once those first 30 minutes or so are done, the film does take a breath and become easier to digest, but it still never throws out the crazy comic bookiness of the adventure. If you don't have that much experience with the ridiculousness of the Silver Age stories, then you're probably going to look at a few specific scenes in the film with a gobsmacked expression, particularly one involving an anti-proton river and a black hole. Regardless, I don't really feel that the movie is bloated. In fact, I think it was fairly straightforward from the beginning with how Lex was clearly manipulating everything and needed to be stopped. I don't think it's that much busier than how The Incredibles starts, for example. Another fairly common complaint I saw was how often serious moments are punctuated with a joke, and I feared it would be too close to how the MCU did those moments at its worst, but it wasn't as bad. The truly serious scenes, of which there aren't that many, stay serious for just as long as they need. The big problem with how the MCU did it sometimes is that jokes came in too early and ruined the emotional payoff, but I think Superman is a little better about at least reaching that payoff first, if only for a second or two, before allowing the joke to come in. Now that being said, if some of the jokes were cut completely to give the emotional moments even more time to breathe, I would not complain. Now if I do have any criticisms to speak of, it's probably the action. Now this isn't to say that the movie has an ugly appearance or is captured poorly. Quite the opposite, in fact. The movie is bright, colorful, and often nice to look at, though some shots look less comic booky and more video gamey, and not really in a good way. But when the action started, it hardly ever reached that point where I thought, holy shit, this is a fight only a Superman movie could have. It got close. There were some moments of coolness, not only by Superman, but the Justice Gang as well. But by and large, the action was really only serviceable. It did not detract from the movie, but it wasn't a high point either, except for one sequence involving Mr. Terrific. His action scene was the best one in the entire movie. Now, I don't know if the movie is meant to sell a Mr. Terrific spin-off or something, but it did a really good job of that anyway. I am ready and willing to see more of him. There's also a plot point gaining some controversy that I am honestly on the fence about that involves Superman's Kryptonian birth parents and the message they leave with him. In other iterations of the hero, his birth parents are usually just as altruistic as he is, including when it came to their intentions of sending their son to Earth. But that has kinda changed here in a way that I don't wholly support. I can see why the changes were made in the face of the war happening in the background and the looming themes of colonization, but I am not terribly eager to embrace it, especially since there's other ways to do the same thing in the plot without actually changing their intention. So I'm gonna need to see where this goes in the next DC Universe movies or something before I can really accept it. Now my last criticism is that, believe it or not, I kinda wish the movie were longer. I would have loved an extra 10 to 15 minutes or so dedicated to exploring the backgrounds and personalities of pretty much any of the support characters, especially the Justice Gang. I wasn't lying when I said everyone was killing it in their roles, big and small. The end result is me wanting to see more of them, because it feels like the only people who truly get a valuable amount of screen time is Superman, Lex, and Lois, with some Mr. Terrific sprinkled in. And this is another reason why the movie probably felt bloated to some people. Scenes between Clark and Lois are great, and they are great together, but I would have liked a bit more. The Kents make the most of their time, but I wouldn't have complained about just a couple more minutes with them. I found myself thinking like that a lot throughout the whole movie. The fact that I just wish we had a few more minutes with all of these characters. Overall, Superman isn't perfect, but it is bursting at the seams with comic book vibrancy and optimism, with fantastic characterization of all the major players. It pays respect to the golden and silver ages of the hero and maintains his humanity and hope. After years of grittier DC adaptations and a ton of Marvel dominance, it's nice to see the greatest hero of all time finally get the bright portrayal he's been kind of missing on the big screen. I'm looking forward to the future of the DC universe. If I were to make any predictions based on the movie, I would say there's a reason to believe Bizarro will probably show up in the future, and if you've seen the movie already, then you probably understand why. Now, since the movie review is done, I kinda want to supplement it with some thoughts on the comics I read in preparation for the movie, since I am unlikely to give them their own video. So if you're only here for the movie review, you can close the video now. But if you want to talk about comics, then keep listening. After reading All-Star Superman and Superman for All Seasons for the first time, I understand why they are considered the two best stories about the Man of Steel and why some people sort of consider them companion stories. As I mentioned before, All-Star Superman is basically a greatest hit style story about a Superman many years into his hero career that touches on everything from the Golden Age onward, and you can tell that a lot of time went into researching all Superman media for it. Grant Morrison really is a dedicated writer. Whereas Superman for All Seasons is pretty much the opposite. It's a collection of 4 stories, none of which are from Superman's perspective, but instead 4 people who know him. It takes place fairly early on in his hero career because he isn't romantically involved with Lois yet, and Lex Luthor is pretty much the only villain that he has any relationship with, but it's a very earnest story that's less about Superman's own trials and tribulations and more about what he means to the people around him. So I really liked that story, and kinda prefer it over All-Star Superman, though both are extremely good in their own way. Then we have Alan Moore's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which has a premise that's somewhat similar to All-Star Superman's, about our hero reaching the end of his career, but it is shorter and a little bit more grim at times, but still ends optimistically and somewhat bittersweetly. As for Kingdom Come, I actually had read it for the first time a long time ago, but I barely remembered it, so I just decided to reread it for the hell of it, and man, it is amazing. I consider it my favorite out of all the comics I'm talking about right now. It's not a dedicated Superman story, but he plays a very important role. I've seen some people over the years say that Alex Ross's art carries it, but I don't agree at all with that statement. I think its themes and comments on how most of the gritty, violent anti-heroes just don't have the staying power of the Golden Age faces has only gotten more true with time. Similarly, it shows that when you take a Golden Age face and turn them into excessively sanctimonious and controlling assholes, they lose their own magic as well. The best versions of themselves are when they're between the two extremes. You could also get some messages out of it about how bad blind nostalgia can be, which is rampant in this hobby. There's many incredible scenes in Kingdom Come, but probably my favorite is when the Justice League finally confront Magog, who is basically the face of the violent New Age heroes who are more willing to be reckless, and instead of some huge epic fight, Magog just breaks down in guilt because his actions caused the deaths of countless people he was trying to save. He says the people chose the hero who was willing to kill over the hero who wasn't, and they all died for it. Amazing scene, among many others in that story. So yeah, that's basically everything I wanted to say about the comics. All of them were great in their own way, and if you have not read any of them, then I strongly recommend you do so, because they are all different versions of peak Superman. Now this, finally, concludes my review of the new Superman film. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.